News of Aegon's landing in Westeros and his conquest of Griffin's Roost has reached King's Landing, where John Connington's nephew, Red Ronnet, proclaims his innocence to the Lord Regent, Kevan Lannister, and the new Hand of the King, Mace Tyrell, and the rest of the small council. Kevan Lannister wants to move against Aegon and the Golden Company immediately, but the Tyrell faction refuses to do anything until Marjorie is proved innocent. Mace Tyrell underestimates John Connington, but Kevan thinks that he'll be older now and wiser. He also points out that there is another Targaryen claimant with 3 dragons, but Mace Tyrell dismisses Dany as well, saying she's the Queen of Slavers Bay. Not only are the King's Landing beset by foes in every direction, but their coffers are also empty and they're being denied any further loans from the Iron Bank and the Irish banks as well. Kevan fears that it will eventually have to be supported by Lannister gold again. The council then discusses the upcoming trials of the 2 queens, and Kevan informs the council that Cersei has opted for trial by battle with Sir Robert Strong as her champion, and that once her innocence is proved, she'll be shipped off to Casterly Rock and will have no further contribution to Tormund's upbringing. Marjorie, however, is to be tried by the Faith. After the council session ends, Kevan leaves to prepare for supper with Cersei and King Tormund, and while crossing the snow-covered yard, he contemplates the dismal state of the King's Guard. He also thinks of Cersei and how she has brought all of this mess on her own head, but he thinks it's a pity she's lost her fire because of her walk of shame. He thinks of how many lives would have been saved had Aerys agreed to marry Rhaegar to Cersei. At supper with Cersei and Tormund spends all of his time talking about kittens, while Kevan informs Cersei that there is still no news about either Jaime or Tyrion. The meal is interrupted by a message from Grand Maester Pycelle, who wants to speak to Sir Kevan urgently. Kevan arrives at the rookery to find a white raven perched in the window, signifying that winter has arrived. He turns around to look for Pycelle and is shot by a crossbow quarrel, and then realizes that Pycelle is lying dead at his table. He thinks this is Tyrion's work since it's a crossbow, but then Varys reveals himself. He claims to have done this for the good of the realm. He intends this to cause doubt and mistrust between the Lannisters and Tyrells in order to make Aegon's path to the Iron Throne easier, because he thinks Aegon will be a better king, as he thinks kingship is his duty and not his right. Varys then leaves his little birds to finish off Kevan. Okay.
I love this chapter. A lot happens.
We get some of Varys' motivations, right?
Some of Barristan's motivations?
Varys.
Oh, Varys, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, the fact that Kevan's dying almost implies that, he's telling the truth, that Aegon may, in fact, be the real Aegon. Because, why would you lie to a dying man?
Well, yeah, I think it's one of the most amazing final chapters in any of the books. There's so much information, it's so dramatic, and it totally changes the outlook for Cersei, who's been so broken in these books now that Kevan's dead. I love it.
I think it does spell sort of the final defeat, maybe, for the Lannisters in King's Landing. They kind of have completely degraded at this point, which I find interesting because from reading the Grand Northern Conspiracy, I thought a really good point was that despite Tywin's political acumen, his legacy has kind of been one of total defeat and sort of degradation, whereas Ned could possibly, despite his obvious lack of his acumen, that he might actually have a better standing in the future. At least his legacy will.
I actually really enjoyed Kevan's point of view. I mean, he's even after everything Cersei has done, he still loves her because she's his niece. And we get how much he loves his family and how much he actually wants to, his intentions are very good, and that's kind of surprising considering he's a Lannister.
Yeah, he's a really decent guy. It's good to see some good Lannisters. I mean, we see some good Lannisters in book 4, but you got to keep reminding yourself the whole house doesn't represent everyone. It's just a series of individuals.
Yeah.
He's also shrewd. He has enough of the shrewdness of Tywin in assessing the political situation without that kind of single-minded pride, house pride that kind of sometimes blinds Tywin to practicalities. It's a shame. He's one of the coolest POVs, and we only get him for a chapter.
Yeah, he seems less interested in, the legacy or the glory or the prestige of House Lannister. He just wants to restore stability to the realm, which is admirable, yeah. But yeah, it does definitely seem to I mean, House Lannister won the War of the Five Kings essentially, but they've pretty much lost everything else. They've almost been completely usurped by the Tyrells. I think it was half-half, they said, with the small council, half-half kind of Tyrells and Lannisters. But now they've lost 2 of those members.
Mace Tyrell comes across as even more of an idiot in this chapter than he has before.
He's an idiot, but he manages to sort of get a lot of stuff anyway.
Well, yeah,
but it helps when you have a huge standing army and money.
Yeah,
That's
and
true,
most of that is because of his mother's manipulation, right? His mother's and his daughter's manipulation.
Yeah, he has smart people around him.
You have to wonder how much that's going to go for, because I personally am of the opinion that he doesn't stand a chance against Aegon, especially if one of my theories is that what is his name? Randall Tarly is working for Aegon secretly. They do say that they have a man on the inside of the Tyrells, and I think he's the one.
Really, Randall Tarly?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's a stretch. I don't have much basis.
Actually. No, but that is possible because even Mace Tyrell and all his bannermen were supporting the Mad King until the very end. In fact, they were supporting him even after the Targaryens had been removed, right, for a long time. So it's possible that he could have, switched back to Targaryen loyalty.
All I'm really basing that off of is the fact that I believe John Connington mentions they do have a man on the Tyrell side or from the Reach that'll be joining them soon, and he seems like the most likely named character.
Yeah, I think because the Tyrells, since they have a stake in this now, since Marjorie is queen now, they won't want to switch sides. But any of their bannermen could. It's not really that hard to imagine.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of kind of like a counterfactual history. If Kevan had remained alive, ruling with Tommen, he actually probably would have been like a really decent regent.
Yeah, he would have.
Having won the wars, he probably would have just, sorted out the finances and kept the peace and basically been great.
You have to wonder how he would handle Aegon,
He's
though.
a competent commander.
Because while he is definitely sturdy, I don't think he has the same brilliance as Tywin to handle that sort of military mire.
Yeah, but he's sort of like midway between Ned and Tywin. He's not ruthless like Tywin, but he's not as stupid as Ned either. He's kind of in between. So I think it could have worked. And he's probably a decent commander in the field too, right? So
an interesting question for you, Zach, is who of the current leaders do you think could withstand Aegon? Can anyone withstand Aegon?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of factors at play. Obviously, everything in the north and how all that's going to play out. Whether the others will cause a lot of trouble, I don't know. Like, my personal opinion is that no one can stop Aegon. I feel like he's perfectly placed to take control, and of course, you have to account for Dany and how all that will play out too. But I don't know. I think that if Randall Tarly really is on Aegon's side, obviously, again, that's a bit of a stretch. I don't know if any of them can stop him.
And he probably just have a lot of bannermen just switching over to his side, right? Because it's only been, 18 years, 16 years since Robert's Rebellion, and there will still be a lot of Targaryen loyalists around. So,
especially with Varys clearly destabilizing things for Aegon.
I'm just thinking of the parallels back to the Princess and the Queen, and the parallels back to the anarchy in England, and just thinking that I can see Aegon achieving a very quick and Pyrrhic victory, basically with the Golden Company just rushing in, and King's Landing's very destabilized and maybe taking it and maybe holding it for a year, but it just feels like he doesn't have overwhelming military numbers, and in a situation that's destabilized and that anarchic, will it just be a Pyrrhic victory?
Yeah, it's going to depend on a lot of things. If the Martells join him, or if Doran's going to stick back and not get involved once more, or if someone in the Tyrell side joins him. That's obviously going to be what really changes the tides. He cannot maintain control of the Golden Company alone, certainly.
Yeah, well, I think in this chapter they reveal that he might have captured Storm's End, which would be a huge victory for Aegon.
Though that's a blow against Stannis, not really King's Landing.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, Stannis is gone. He's been gone for over a year now. So the Stormlands, the houses of the Stormlands, kind of haven't really had a leader. So I guess if Aegon steps in, they might actually possibly fall around him if he has the kind of symbolic seat of the Stormlands.
And they probably have more loyalty to Stannis, right? They haven't had Stannis for their lord for very long.
Yeah,
so-
their loyalty to him was pretty
Again,
thin at the
please.
beginning, and he hasn't been there for about
Yeah.
a year. So
Yeah,
I think
but
they'll
you have
flip
to-
around
so good
anyone.
switch.
Yeah.
Yep.
And plus, he has
have
this
to-
weird new religion
That's
that they
right,
might
yeah.
not hold.
That's true. You have to wonder though what their loyalty is to the Targaryens though, because obviously they're Baratheon, Robert Baratheon being their legacy, or they're of the Baratheon lands. You have to wonder what their allegiance would be to them, and if even taking Storm's End would galvanize them against him because he's stealing their castle.
True, that's true. Yeah, they're probably more loyal to the Baratheon name, even if it is Stannis, than to the Targaryen name. It's hard to say. But I guess they might just be forced into it, even if their heart's not into it. They can't really say no if they've got a huge army and they're marching across the land. They might just have to wed their forces to him as they march to King's Landing.
That's true. I think they will follow the Tyrells, whatever path they take, determining how they play out, because that's kind of how it's been so far for them.
Right. So it seems like the Tyrells might take over King's Landing. I mean, Varys says chaos, chaos, chaos. That's what he wants. He wants the Lannisters and the Tyrells at each other's throats, but I can't really see power that the Lannisters have left in King's Landing. I mean, Cersei is completely, locked down. She has no power. Unless she succeeds in the trial and can maybe, grasp some power back from that. But other than that, like, who is there to pick up the pieces from the Lannisters?
Jaime, potentially, if he returns. He doesn't seem interested.
Right.
And, of course,
But
he's
in
in
the
kind of his own peril.
Yeah.
And he could be in some peril with Uncat, so we can't really determine what's going to happen with him, but he's also a factor.
Yeah. If Jaime can somehow get back. But even so, he's a Lord Commander, so he doesn't really have that I don't know if he has that kind of power.
I feel that the wild card with Jaime, where we've left him, is if he does somehow survive and get back, he has had this sort of newfound loyalty and love for his children, and I think he'd want to do whatever he could for Tommen to kind of, if he felt that by acting in some way he could secure Tommen's reign, he probably would.
Yeah. Do you guys think Varys is the High Sparrow?
Oh, wow. I never even thought that.
Yeah, because kind of disappears around the same time as the High Sparrow pops up in book 4.
I feel like Cersei would have recognized Varys, even with his Master of Disguise.
I agree, but Ned kind of does the same thing in the dungeons. He doesn't recognize him, so he has all these disguises that he puts on. And Cersei might not even think twice or look twice at a high septon. But it's out there.
Presumably, these septons and scepters are in pretty elaborate, like gowns and whatnot.
Right. Yeah.
That's true.
I quite like the idea that he is, but I'm not sure there's masses of proof.
Well, you can make the argument that this High Septon sort of came out of nowhere, and his followers aren't really a part of the former church or the Septness. I don't know what you call it. But yeah, like his sort of rise to power didn't really have any relation to the past regime, so it easily could have been like a sudden installment that he gained all these sort of commoner followers from the Riverlands. But I guess there are some. It's hard to justify that he could have made all that happen on his own.
Yeah, like he sort of maybe even if it isn't Varys, at least whoever is the High Sparrow, he saw the way the currents were turning. He saw how fed up the small folk were getting. So we're sort of seeing a quasi-religious small folk uprising possibly. And whoever can wield that is going to have tremendous power in King's Landing.
Yeah, especially now that they have their own army forming.
Absolutely.
In wartime, people are turning more and more towards the religious power, and I think that is definitely a factor.
If Varys can get the faith militia behind Aegon, that'll be a huge power. So it might be.
Then I think he's unstoppable. If Aegon unites with the faith, that's job done, isn't it? I mean,
as you say, if he collects a bunch of castles really quickly, collects King's Landing really quickly, and has essentially the southeast side of Westeros. Even if he wouldn't even have to conquer the Westerlands or the Reach. He would just have that symbolic power, and people would slowly, creep out of the chaos to join him and try and bound up the kingdom.
Yeah, that's sort of my theory right now that I actually been working on for a while, and I maybe should throw up on the forums, is this whole Aegon and the Golden Company's master plan is really effective, it seems, at this point. I guess another factor, though, is if John Connington will be incapacitated soon by his grayscale, because he's definitely the mastermind right now.
That's right, yeah.
But that's not necessarily fatal. I mean, if he's told enough people of the strategy, and if it's well enough in place, I mean, if by the time John Connington dies, Aegon has Storm's End, if he has King's Landing, if he has the Faith Militant, it'll just, the momentum will go with it, especially if he has Varys / High Septon as an advisor who's really smart. Yeah. So his legacy will be ensured, I think.
Right. Do you guys think we see Cersei for a little bit in this chapter? Do you think she's completely broken, or has she got a bit of fight left in her?
I would say she's still going. It obviously will depend on how the trial plays out, but I think that, as I suspect she will come out of it successful, that she still is definitely a player.
Yeah, she makes a sly little remark about Kevin's wife.
Yeah, exactly. I just think and my reasoning for this is not anything in the text. It's just she's too juicy a character. She's been so far, and
Right.
George R. R. Martin's brought her to the point of being almost broken on that walk of shame, and I think now we'll see her remade, just as we see Jaime being remade. I think they have an interesting twin path to follow. So I think she's going to stick around. I'm really interested to see what happens to her. And she still has her children. She still has Myrcella and Tommen, so she still has something to live for. That's what got her through the walk of shame. And I think she'll play the pious, broken woman when she has to get through the whatever she needs to. And also, maybe she finally feels, because, her big thing is ambition and always feeling the men get the chances. Tywin's gone, Tyrion's gone, Kevin's gone. All the men who could possibly hold her back have gone. And maybe she'll feel now is her time in the sun.
Right.
We have to wonder how long her children will last. They're definitely not secure at this point, and there's of course the prophecy that they will die.
I thought one of the last sort of lines that Tommen speaks, where he's talking about the black cat outside of his window, might be the kind of the death knell that he's going to die soon, this kind of black omen, because it obviously references Rhaenyra, who was also killed during the previous uprising, during the sack of King's Landing. She was killed, and she obviously wasn't a player in the Game of Thrones like Tommen, but she was killed because she has to. So maybe when Aegon comes in, they'll have to kill Tommen because he's a threat to their inheritance.
Aegon has to kill him, right? But then again, is it Aegon who's going to kill him, or is it
whoever moves in? Yeah.
I mean, he's dodgy, and he has no real. Now that Kevin's gone, like, who's going to be Tommen's regent? Who's going to protect him in King's Landing? It's huge. I mean, that poor kid. Whereas at least Myrcella has the Dornish who are trying to use her, but she has people in whose interest it is to keep her alive. I don't understand in whose interest it is to keep Tommen alive, except for Cersei and Jaime, who are both otherwise engaged right now.
And he's Sir Pounce will protect him.
Yeah, and he's so sort of adorable when he's... Sorry.
Sorry, I was making a joke. Sir Pounce.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know, when he's talking about his cats, it's so adorable. He's just... Martin is setting him up to be killed so quickly.
That's so bad.
But you mentioned the cat.
I can't believe I want a Lannister to live.
I know, he's so cute.
But Myrcella and Tommen are actually sweet kids, right? I mean, whenever we see them, they're just really adorable. Myrcella's actually really smart. They're really sensible. I mean, coming from the genetic and like psycho, disastrous pool that they come from, it's a miracle. These kids seem really sorted.
Yeah, well, I think Tywin messed up a lot of his kids, but maybe the genes themselves aren't so tainted as they are in the Targaryens, maybe. Because Joanna seemed lovely, and even Jaime is sort of slowly coming out of that horrible sort of family unit. And the uncles were described as pretty nice. So yeah, hopefully, Myrcella seems like she probably would be a pretty good queen. She's compassionate, and she's demonstrated pretty great strategies and intelligence and compassion. Yeah.
I think either of them would be a good king and queen. And like I said, I think Tommen, if ruling through Kevan as regent, would have made a perfectly fine king, actually.
I don't know. Tommen seems a bit sort of soft. Like he seems delightful, and I don't want him to die, but I don't know if he would have been a great king.
Yeah, but he's a kid. He is.
I know, yeah, but yeah, that's true. But he just seems like, even when the Dornish are talking about comparing him to Tommen, Myrcella is obviously the more rule of the two, even though they're only like 1 year apart. Myrcella is so far ahead of Tommen.
Yeah, Tommen and Tristan are very similar, I think, just harmless little boys.
That's right. And I think it is supposed to be symbolic of the kind of innocence that will suffer when the High Lords play their Game of Thrones. But you mentioned the Cat of the Canals, which is one of the possible ways he could be, which is Arya, in fact, is contracted to assassinate him. And that's
I mean, she's definitely coming back to kill someone. And I always thought it would either be Tommen or it would be one of her brothers and sisters. Like, she'd come back in a position where she has to do something that makes her question herself.
Right. You don't buy it, Zach?
Yeah, you have to think that she'll come into play somehow. But I mean, of course, you have to take into account the law of the Faceless Man that you can't kill someone you know, and she knows Tommen.
Does she though? Does she know him?
Well,
she might have seen
familiar with him
from afar, but I don't know if she's spoken to him or anything.
I think that there's been a level of interaction that would probably create some issue in terms of that. I don't know for sure, though. I mean, I guess it's possible. It's not the case. I don't know. I think that while Arya does have a place in the story back in Westeros, I hope. I just don't think that's going to be how it's going to play out.
Sure, right. That's fair enough. One final point: the trial that will determine Cersei's innocence is going to be fought by Sir Robert Strong, who I assume. Do we all think he's Gregor Clegane reborn?
Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah.
I found a really cool quote in let's sort of jump ahead to the Dornish a bit. We find out that his head may have been cut off, so it might imply that this is kind of like a headless corpse that's actually been reanimated. And I found this quote in A Game of Thrones where in one of Bran's chapters, when he's in the coma, he actually swoops down to King's Landing and he sees his father and his two sisters sort of crying and distraught, and he sees the Hound and he sees Jaime and he sees this monstrous mountain that sort of this mountainous man that towers above all, and then when the helm opens up, there's just nothing there. It's just a black pit. So that might have been a foreshadowing to this book where we have the headless Gregor Clegane.
So one theory is that because of that vision that Bran has and a few other ideas, hopeful fan ideas, that the Hound and Jaime will return, that we'll get a trial of 7 a la the Hedge Knight, where we have a bunch of these warriors fighting it out in this trial.
Oh. Well, the other possibility is that the Faith have to produce their own warrior to fight on behalf of them, and one possibility is that they already have a really great warrior in possibly the Hound, who is residing on Quiet Isle. So maybe these two brothers will finally sort of fight each other once and for all from beyond the grave. But that's probably fan fiction-y.
Yeah.
I see the beauty, the kind of the elegance of having the Hound come back for one final fight of closure with his brother. But
yeah,
I like the idea that characters don't have to always come back. They don't always have to be someone else in disguise. That we can just leave the Hound at peace, because I feel he has closure. He's at peace and just leave him. He can just fade into history like Hot Pie. They don't all have to come back.
I totally agree. I would rather they just left the Hound in peace. He's found some level of peace. He's sort of, he's okay with himself and his place in the world. But the more sort of schlocky side wants these two warriors to face off. But I definitely agree, for his character, it would be far more elegant to have him just remain on Quiet Isle.
Yeah, I agree too, and I think that we have to make those concessions in terms of just letting characters be in a story that has so many characters and that doesn't have much time to resolve all their storylines in a way that might be totally satisfying.
Yeah, and to let those mysteries just kind of linger and fade away and let things remain ambiguous. That's kind of even, I like that. I don't really want every single mystery to be solved.
Exactly.
I don't even think I want the Lyanna and Rhaegar thing to be solved. I'd rather that just slip away. And just be this
so many people would be so angry if they never saw Howland Reed.
But I think I'm happy to still see Howland Reed. But I'll be happy either way. I just want to read the final 2 books. But I'm okay with them leaving things ambiguous like that.
Yeah, I agree.
So any more to discuss on Kevan at King's Landing?
I guess not. The only thing that I would add, just from my sort of economics-y side, is I find it interesting, like just that quick throwaway line about the crown being indebted and being cut off of money. And I really hope in the next book we see more financial consequences of that, just because one of my aspects of geekiness is economics. So
right, yeah.
I still have this aim to one day do a read through and write about the kind of the finances of Westeros and the consequences of sovereign default.
That would be so cool.
It's not awesome. It would be like geeky squared, but one day I shall do it.
You'll hit that sweet demographic of A Song of Ice and Fire fans who are also economists.
Exactly. All 16 people in the entire known world.
I would totally read that.
No, but like stuff like, how far do how much wealth do the Lannisters have? Like, where is all this gold? I mean, is the gold that was nicked during the Princess and the Queen significant as a source of Lannister wealth? All that kind of stuff would be quite fun. But yeah.
Comparing the gold wealth to the food wealth of the Tyrells sort of stuff too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think one of the things that you see the Lannisters are coming apart at this point, is that they've started to not live up to their oath or their kind of unofficial words. A Lannister always pays his debts, and they've defaulted on their debts to the Iron Throne. To the Iron Bank of Ravos. So, money, gold is their power, and they're starting to let it slip through their fingers. I mean, I think Kevan even comments that they might have to actually start going into the Lannister coffers to pay back some of the crown's debt, which is interesting.
But that's the point, right? So now if Tommen or Cersei or anyone were now in a position to try and raise an army and try and counter any of these invasions or attacks upon them, what are they going to promise mercenaries when your word as a creditor fails? You know, it's really damaging to your ability to fight a war. I mean, I strongly believe wars are won financially. So it's I think it's going to be interesting to see what the repercussions are.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I sympathize with the horrible things that are happening to Cersei now, but the way she managed her rulership was so bad. She made the worst decision in practically every scenario, and the Lannisters have been taken from the top of the power structure to practically, falling apart at this point. Okay, should we move on to the Dornish?
Sounds good.
Cool.
Let's do it.